Welcome, my dear listeners. Stay with me to get the news first and subscribe to the channel. Let's find out what's going to happen on Royal Family. Prince William doesn't get angry in the news. Instead, Harry's speech in Australia opens up the Sussex divide again. Prince William explodes after Harry's Australia speech is the headline that will get the most attention, but the news I found tells a quieter and more useful story. Prince Harry and Meghan went to Australia for 4 days to talk about sports, mental health, veterans issues, and community service. Harry called Australia's leadership on its under-16 social media ban epic during one of his appearances in Melbourne. At the same event, Meghan talked about being abused online for 10 years. The news I read doesn't show that William reacted to the speech in public. It does show that the Sussex visit brought up the old debate about what Harry and Meghan are doing now, how their public image works, and why people still look at every speech through the lens of the royal family they left behind. That matters because the trip to Australia was never going to be a normal publicity tour. Harry and Meghan arrived in Australia on Tuesday for a 4-day visit that started at Melbourne's Royal Children's Hospital and included stops for mental health, sports, and veterans causes. According to Reuters also said that the couple gave up their royal duties in 2020, moved to the United States, and are now living a public life that is both charitable and very businesslike. So even though they aren't working royals anymore, every appearance is still seen as a royal one. Tabloids love to use the word explodes in headlines like this one. The real public record I found, though, is about what Harry said, not how William responded. On April 16, Harry spoke at a Bartar-hosted mental health discussion in Melbourne and called Australia's ban on social media epic leadership. According to Reuters, Meghan also said at the same event that she had been the target of online abuse for 10 years and called herself the most trolled person in the world. That's a strong emotional message on its own, and it doesn't need a brotherly fight to make it even stronger. The setting also made the speech seem like a bigger story than it would have been in other places. Reuters said that the couple's tour included stops in Sydney and Canberra, meetings with veterans, and a visit to the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne. People said that the trip felt like a regular royal tour, even though Harry and Meghan are no longer working members of the family. Because they look like royalty, people keep criticizing them. They are not acting like official royals, but they still move through the world like royalty. The story's real heart is that tension. Reuters said that the trip to Australia was paid for privately and that people were upset about the costs of security and safety concerns. Reuters also said that a petition against the cost got more than 45,000 signatures. People also say that the trip had both public and private parts that made signatures. People also said that the trip had both public and private parts that made it feel like a mix of charity work and building a brand. When Harry talks about how social media can hurt people, people don't just hear him. This is a part of a bigger debate about whether the Sussexes are still doing public service or just giving royal visibility a new twist for a different audience. That's why the William erupts angle gets attention even when there isn't any proof. People will always look at what Harry says in public through the lens of his relationship with the Prince of Wales. But the reports I found don't show a verified William response to the speech in Australia. Instead, it shows that the speech itself is just his story. Both Reuters and Reuters video focused on Harry's praise for Australia's ban on social media for kids under 16. His comments about being a father and Meghan's comments about bullying online. To sum up, the speech happened and made the news, but I couldn't find any reliable coverage of the supposed William explosion. That doesn't make things any less like to catch fire, it actually makes it more interesting. Harry's speech was meant to be about mental health and keeping kids safe, but it was also very political in a general way, saying that Australia's leaders are epic when it comes to social media reform is not a neutral statement. It puts Harry squarely in the role of public advocate, praising what the government is doing and linking the issue to the mental health of young people. Meghan's comments about ongoing online abuse added another layer, making the appearance a mix of testimony, advocacy, and a carefully planned public image moment. The fact that there are two sides to the Sussex story is what keeps it going. On the one hand, they are doing things that seem serious and important to society, like visiting hospitals, talking about mental health, getting veterans involved, and reaching out to the community. On the other hand, Meghan also made a guest appearance as a judge on MasterChef Australia. Reuters also say that she will co-host a luxury wellness retreat in Sydney. Because of this, the British press has had no trouble making the visit seem both charitable and businesslike. The mixed identity is what makes the story always have problems. And that's exactly what headlines like this take advantage of. Sussex war reaches breaking point sounds like a palace drama that is already getting out of the hand behind the scenes. But the real reporting I found points to a different kind of pressure. Public criticism over optics, security, and business goals. A speech about social media and mental health, and a couple whose every move is still compared to the royal machinery they left behind in 2020. The war as it stands is mostly a war of ideas. It's also important to remember that Harry's comments about Australia were a part of a longer trip that got mixed reviews. Reuters say that the couple was not very warmly welcomed when they arrived. Later reports say that people thought the tour was too commercial for a couple of former working royals. People say that the trip included a stop at Bondi Beach and a meeting with survivors of the Bondi attack, which makes the trip seem very humanitarian, but the public keeps talking about motive because Harry and Meghan are still very visible, very divisive, and the press can't talk about them without bringing up the royal split. That's the part of the tabloid headline that is both right and wrong. The headline wants you to fight, but the story gives you a message. The message is that Harry is still talking about things that are important to him on public platforms. Meghan is still being open about abuse and scrutiny. And the couple is still getting the kind of attention that makes a royal family response seem unavoidable, even though none has been confirmed publicly. The end result is a story that isn't so much about an eruption as it is about tension that hasn't been resolved. There is also the practical point that I couldn't find any reliable reports of a William reaction. That may seem small, but it's the kind of detail that matters in a story like this. When royal news becomes certain without proof, readers can't tell what was said, what was implied, and what was made up. The real sources show Harry talking in Melbourne, Meghan talking about abuse, and Australia's social media love as the setting. They don't show a confirmed explosion at the palace. What does all of this mean? A famous Sussex visit to Australia, a speech that praised a ban on social media while also pushing for mental health, a continuing debate between business and charity, and the royal family still being the focus of every move. That is enough to make 1,000 headlines, but it doesn't prove that William exploded. The strongest verified reading is simpler and more important. Harry's speech in Australia made the Sussex divide worse, and the press did the rest. And this is where the real story quietly shifts. Because the drama isn't in a reaction, it's in the silence. Because if Prince William truly had something explosive to say, we would have heard it, and the fact that we haven't says more than any headline ever could. Honestly, this feels less like a family clash, and more like two completely different paths that no longer need to respond to each other. And that's what makes it powerful. Harry speaks openly, emotionally, publicly, while William's world stays controlled, measured and almost deliberately quiet. But here is the question that really lingers. Does that silence keep the peace, or does it quietly widen the distance even more? And if Harry continues to speak on global issues like this, will every speech keep pulling the royal connection back into the spotlight? Whether William responds or not. Because let's be real, the divide doesn't need arguments anymore. It lives in the contrast. I actually think this is where things are heading long term. Fewer direct clashes but deeper, more permanent separation in how both sides operate. And that might be harder to fix than any public argument because silence can settle into something final. So what do you think? Does William's lack of reaction show strength, or does it leave too much unsaid? And if Harry keeps stepping into bigger global conversations, will the royal shadow ever truly fade, or will it always follow him? Because this doesn't feel like the end of a conflict, it feels like a new phase, one where the distance speaks louder than words ever could.